I wanted to talk a little bit about risk and how you're thinking about risk in terms of whether you'll decide to get into a trade or not. How do you think about risk to reward?
Yeah. So I think risk is the most important part of anyone's trading. If your risk's not in control, then you're not going to be profitable in the long term. But I use a 1% system where 1% of account value. But I will add scale, and sometimes that'll be 2-3% if the trade's working correctly. I kind of like to be aggressive on something that's working in my favor.
So, in terms of 1%, are you thinking about just using 1% of your account value on any given trade?
Yes. So those are the main setups, right? If I'm adding a new setup, and right now I'm really only trading a couple of setups, two or three. But if I'm adding a new setup, I'll maybe do a third of that or a fourth of that. Something that still makes the trade meaningful, but not so much as in I'm new, I'm going to make mistakes in the new setup. So I'd rather that not be as much market tuition.
What type of risk to reward ratio are you looking for, or what does it take for you to get interested in a stock and decide that you're possibly going to be entering a trade?
I don't really have a specific risk reward that I need. I have some setups that I may only get a 1-to-1, but in those setups, I'll be winning, 70, 80% of the time. But then there's other setups where you're only winning 40% of the time. But, I think for those, you need a much higher risk reward. But if I have data on something or an edge on something, I'll trade it as long as it's a real edge.
Are you adding into losing trades? Do you do just, one entry and that's it? Or do you scale in based on certain risk parameters? What does that look like in terms of the trade management as it relates to risk?
Yeah. So I never add to a loser. That's one of my rules. It's a slippery slope when you start adding to losers, in my opinion, or maybe that just doesn't work for me. But usually my first entry is data driven, and then after that, if the trade starts working or starts proving, then I'm scaling, and I'm scaling in at a 1%, and then I'm scaling into 2 or 3% if it continues to work.
How do you apply risk management to your trades?
Definitely have some practical rules, the max loss, um, but really, I'm never I'm always putting a stop in, whether it's mental or hard stop. I'm always having something in place to check me. I never want to be in a position where I freeze up and something keeps going against me, because that can get out of hand very quickly.
Do you have a max stop per trade? Do you have a max stop and a max loss on an amount per day that you're going to just walk away from trading altogether? How do you think about those types of scenarios in terms of knowing when to stop a trade?
I have a max loss per day. I know other traders use a max loss per trade. Um, that doesn't work for me because I know I will just carry that into the next trade. I know if I'm emotional on a trade, I think I should rather just step away, because if I'm being emotional on that trade, who's to say I'm not going to be emotional on the next trade? Maybe that'll change in the future, but as of right now, if it hits that max stop, I'm done for the day.
Is your max stop something that you keep mental note of and you stop it manually, or is this something that you set with your trading platform and your broker?
Yeah. So originally it was mental, and that did not work. I took in January and February, I took a bigger loss than I ever thought I would on, funny enough, ticker HOLO, which is hollow. And so, after that, I listened to Nate's suggestion and I implemented it at broker level. And so if it hits that, they take me out and they don't let me enter any more trades. But, I never really thought I'd hit that again. But then, top came around and I hit max loss on top. And if I hadn't hit that, who knows if I'd be around or where I'd be today. So I really recommend it. I think we're all human and we make mistakes, and there's no reason to let that one mistake blow your chance at sustained success.
Do you have any recommendations to traders who might be struggling with their risk management? What's one piece of advice that you would give to them, anybody who's looking to improve in that area?
Risk management is really the most important part. If you can't admit when you're wrong, then it's I don't think trading's for you, because everybody's wrong at some point. But I think the great traders, when they're wrong, they cut it immediately and they don't continue on and see what it does. Whereas the new traders, and I used to do this all the time, is just kind of, let's just see what happens after it goes past this, and maybe it'll fail after that, or maybe it'll spike after that, etc. But I just think that's a really slippery slope, and then it goes a lot further than you think. So I think to be successful, it has to be your number one priority.
I know Nate mentions this about capital preservation, and it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying the same thing, which is risk management and the ability to preserve your capital and the ability to come and trade tomorrow is very high up there, if it's not the most important factor.
There's always another trade, and I don't think one trade is ever worth giving your account away.